Time for a deep dive into the one issue that matters most in a capitalist democracy: money. This is Maggie and the Millionaires Talking Money, a joint production of The Maggie Dawn Show and the Patriotic Millionaires.
I've got the OG of the Patriotic Millionaires with us today. His name's Morris Pearl. He's the board chair of the PMs. Previously, he was the managing director at BlackRock, one of the world's largest investment firms. Today, we're here to talk about the stunt that I think all of you saw: Donald Trump at McDonald's. It's weird. Morris, when we look at Donald Trump's policy record, do you think he actually cares about working people?
I don't think so. He appointed officials who are against enforcing the existing labor laws, certainly against improving labor laws, against union organizing. We had people running the National Labor Relations Board who were opposed to labor relations. I mean, how much more ridiculous can you get? I think they're basically concerned about corporate profits quarter by quarter, and they don't even think the long term beyond the next 3 months. No.
Yeah, it ironic isn't even a big enough word for what that was. I mean, yes, it was a photo stunt, but he was asked while he was there, does he support a minimum wage? What was his response?
Well, he didn't actually answer the question.
Of course not.
He talked about how they had no proof that Vice President Harris actually worked for McDonald's to help support herself 40 some odd years ago. Like, do you have any proof what you were doing 40 years ago? Neither do I. And frankly, I don't really care. And it's not like he worked at McDonald's either. He had a photo up there while it was closed for a few minutes. I don't get the point.
Nor did I. I mean, I worked at a little diner called Heinemann's, and I would never be able to prove that. Here was his answer. This is just the direct quote for everyone. He was asked if he's in favor of increasing the minimum wage, which, just for everybody's reference, the federal minimum wage has not been increased since July of 2007. Excuse me. There were two more increases after July 2007 to $7.25 in July 2009. Pardon me. Here was his answer to, should we raise the minimum wage that hasn't gone up since 2009? Well, I think these people work hard. They're great. And I just saw something, the process. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing to see. They are great franchises. They produce a lot of jobs. But what about the minimum wage, sir? I mean, what? How does Vice President Harris differ from Donald Trump on this question of the minimum wage, Morris?
Do you know you can legally work at McDonald's in either Wisconsin or New York if you were not even born the last time the minimum wage was raised?
Wow.
We were just looking at that. Like Kamala Harris, she's in favor of higher minimum wage, period.
Yes.
Well, Donald Trump clearly is not. He's not even in favor of enforcing the existing minimum wage law. And if you're not even if you're not even willing to enforce the existing laws, then you got nothing, because it doesn't help to have more laws if there's no government officials to enforce the laws in the first place. So clearly, if you're a worker, or if you're anybody who's a law-abiding citizen, and you don't want to be competing with people who don't bother following the laws, you should be in favor of having governments enforcing the laws and not letting, corporations, they're good and money somehow trickles down, so we're going to just let them do whatever they want. No, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, especially labor laws. Like, labor laws are there to protect workers, period. And if you won't enforce them, and if you promise to give away your administration to the highest bidder, i.e. the oil companies, I mean, it's all of a whole. Like, you're not working in the best interests of working Americans, like period, full stop. The Trump administration's record when it came to union busting activity, there was basically zero enforcement, to your exact point. Minimum wage laws, very little to zero enforcement. You listed all of them very aptly, Morris. But, we hear this time and time again that the biggest objection to this is, well, it won't work for businesses if we raise the minimum wage. Is that true, Morris?
Well, no. Thing is, don't forget, we've actually written a book about wage policy here. This book will be published the first week of December, and we'll start distributing them right after the election. But in the meantime, we know that for a business person, the example we always use is the bar owner cares a lot more about how much beer money the people sitting in the bar have than the wages of the one guy standing behind the bar pouring the beer. And yeah, if he gives the bartender a raise, that will cost him more money. But if we change the rules so that everybody gets a raise by raising the minimum wage, that's going to actually help the guy. The people in Seattle who are complaining that, we can't afford to pay higher wages, they raise the minimum wage. The same guy had to go out and lease bigger space because he had more customers in his restaurant than he could handle, because everyone started eating out more because they were making more money. The right complains that, the number of low wage workers in Seattle is actually down. Well, yeah, it is. And it's not because they moved away, it's because they got raises, so they're not low wage workers anymore.
Yeah, and they've got more money to spend at all those small businesses and even the big corporations, because that's what this is about. To have our economy work, you got to have a middle class that can actually consume the things that small businesses and our largest, most successful corporations create.
Good for them in the long run.
Yes.
Look at the earnings briefings you get from the CEOs of the fast food companies. And you listen to the analysts, what about the minimum wage being raised in California? Actually, we're making more money in California than we were before. That doesn't hurt us at all. Yes, because their customers can afford to buy more stuff. And that's how you make money, is having more customers buying more things from your business, not by trying to cut back on the wages of your workers.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. In California, as of April 1st, most workers, including McDonald's workers, make at least $20 an hour because of a new state law that raised the minimum wage. And a Berkeley professor authored a study about that and found that fast food worker, the increase in the minimum wage has increased other people's wages. They're generating more money. There's more profits. And they haven't killed jobs or caused alarming spikes in the price of a burger at McDonald's. Like, it's working there. I wanted to ask you, Morris, can you tell us about how is this impacting the election? Like, is the minimum wage a popular enough issue or a well understood enough issue to have an impact come November 5th?
Well, obviously, I don't know what's going to have an impact on November 5th. I'm going to vote early voting tomorrow. I hope everyone else votes the same way I do, but I don't know any more than you do about this sort of thing. But I will tell you that the minimum wage always wins in statewide referenda. Referendums to increase the minimum wage always win. But very few politicians have been running on the minimum wage. And so if you do voting in almost any state of the country, they vote in favor of higher minimum wage, except inside the halls of Congress in Washington, D.C., they don't. I think it's because those people, A, they're not minimum wage workers.
Right.
And B, they spend most of their time talking to donors. Minimum wage is not a major issue for most political donors. And they kind of see it, well, if I raise my wages, that'll cost me more money. They don't actually think about the fact that everyone's wages being raised will actually help their businesses. So it's not done well in Congress, but it's doing fine with voters. I honestly believe that if Congress people run on specific campaign of raising the minimum wage, they'll do better.
Yeah, it is overwhelmingly supported when we look at state polling and referenda where voters are asked whether or not to raise the minimum wage. And I think the flip side of what you said as well, Morris, that because we have declared that money is speech and corporations are people and corrupted our political system with that, Congress people have to spend more time thinking about raising money. And the fact of the matter is, those donors are who those elected officials are talking to. It's who the candidates are talking to. It's also true that, listen, if you're working a minimum wage job for $7.25, that's not enough to live on. It's not a poverty wage. So you're probably working some other kind of job, too, to make it work, which means, I'm not sure you got a whole lot of time left over to be calling up your member of Congress and telling them to raise the minimum wage. It's such a pernicious cycle. Can you tell us about the electoral college implications of a higher minimum wage?
Well, look, Wisconsin, where you are, minimum wage $7.25 per hour. Same thing, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia. Those are some of the states that are probably going to have close elections where the minimum wage is $7.25 an hour. Other states have a higher minimum wage. New York State here, it's around $15 an hour. The states that are doing better have higher wages. And think about it. If you're starting a business and you want to sell stuff to people, do you want to go to a state with low wages or high wages? If you think about it, you probably want to be in a high wage state because that's where there's people who can afford to buy stuff from you. Maybe not if your business is like a call center for bill collectors or something.
Right.
But if you're any other kind of a business where you're actually trying to sell stuff to people, you'd prefer to have your business in a high wage state, not a low wage state. High wage states do better than low wage states.
Folks, that's Morris Pearl. He's the board chair of the Patriotic Millionaires. He's a former managing director at BlackRock, one of the world's largest investment management firms. Surveys have reported that over 61% of small business owners support raising the minimum wage. JP Morgan Chase's leader, Jamie Dimon, believes that we should raise the minimum wage because I bet he understands what you're explaining right now, which is we need people who can buy the products that small, medium, and large businesses create. Businesses do better. All workers do better when we raise the minimum wage. What would you say to voters right now, Morris, who are a little skeptical that a higher minimum wage is really what our economy needs?
Look, there are people with economic challenges. There's lots of people on TV talking about, we need to do this and we need to do that and we need to do this in the border and that in the country, whatnot. If you're having a financial challenge, that means you don't have enough money. The way to solve the not having enough money problem is to have more money. It's that simple. It's not, I wish my boss had more money and that would somehow help me because money trickles down. I don't hear that from too many voters.
Yeah, it's where the talking point, where that rubber has to meet the road. I don't think I've ever heard anybody that's just getting by is like, I wish the CEO of my business would make more money so that it can trickle down to me somehow. It's like, no, pay me more, damn it. Obviously.
It makes sense to me.
It certainly does. Morris, I always love how you distill it down to its essence. The Harris campaign has been, I think, a little reticent. And we talked about this a little bit, about the fact that a lot of politicians, this isn't one of the issues that they tend to run on. Should her campaign really be worried about alienating business leaders if she were talking about this more?
No. Well, first, there aren't that many business leaders. Jamie Dimon is fine. His office is right there, actually.
Tell Jamie I say hello. Yeah.
But in the meantime, there are a lot more people who earn paychecks than who sign paychecks. A lot more voters. And the smart business leaders know that they actually want people to make more money. And it makes sense to do that by changing the laws, the rules of our country. Because the first business leader who gives all of his workers a raise, that doesn't really do him that much good.
Yes.
He's paying his workers more money, but his customers aren't getting more money. But if all of the companies do that at the same time, then everybody's making more money and there's more money in the whole economy. That is actually good. As I said before, the bar owner is more concerned about how much beer money his customers have than about the wages of the guy standing there pouring the beer. And if you change the minimum wage laws, that's going to give all of his customers raises. And he's not going to be overly concerned about the fact that he also has to give the bartender a raise too. So, yeah, I don't think that's something they need to worry about. I really don't.
Yeah, it's the literal embodiment of the high tide raising all ships. It's that on a macro scale. And that's what we need to see. I mean, it works from a business perspective. People want this. I finally found the statistic. Whenever it's polled, more than 80% of voters think the minimum wage should be higher. And nearly 2/3 of voters, including 64% of independents and 40% of Republicans, think it should be at least $15 an hour.
That's more than double in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and North Carolina.
Well, that's what I was going to get back to. It's. I talked a couple weeks ago, Morris, about how basically on almost any single metric that evaluates sort of overall wellness of a community, the happiness of its people, et cetera, health metrics, income metrics, education, literacy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, red states all do far worse than blue states, like every single example. So when we look at the fact that still in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Georgia, and North Carolina, the minimum wage is at $7.25 an hour, I think this is something that Vice President Harris should be running on and talking about every day. It's so critically important for the overall health of our economy.
That's what I say too. We can do better than we're actually doing. And there's a lot more voters who will benefit from raising the minimum wage than the small number who, for whatever reason, are concerned about it. You know, we need to make some improvements and we need to do something that people can see being improved. I think Vice President Harris has to, tell the voters that we're all in this together.
Yes.
We don't want to have a country where there's a lot of people just struggling to get by, whether they're immigrants, whether people whose families were immigrants 100 years ago or 50 years ago, like Donald Trump's family, or, a little bit more like my family, or even thousands of years ago, like the, original Native Americans who came from, the other side of the world. We're all in this together now. And I don't want to live in a country with a few rich people and millions of people who are struggling to get by. That's not the kind of country where I grew up. Or maybe it was, but they were kind of hidden away in some place that I didn't know much. But that's still not the kind of country where I want to grow up, because we're all going to do better if we all do better. And that includes the business people and the investors. It really does.
So simple. We'll all do better when we all do better. So true. As we close out here, just another small statistic for folks. Since 1996, each time a minimum wage increase has been put to voters on a statewide ballot measure, it's passed. So, Morris, I'm going to ask you in 30 seconds. Do we have 30, Aaron? We do. We got 30 exactly. What's your final economic message to voters?
If we all, like you said, if we all do better, we're all going to do better because we're in this together. We need to be on the same side, not trying to fight against each other.
Don't let Donald Trump pit you against other working people. We're in this together. Thanks so much to Morris Pearl.
Thanks for listening to Maggie and the Millionaires Talking Money, a joint production of Civic Media and the Patriotic Millionaires. For more information, go to patrioticmillionaires.org and be sure to tell your friends. The Patriotic Millionaires buy advertising across a number of Civic Media stations.